You think locking your door is enough? Ancient Egyptians would laugh at that. They used gods, garlic beer, and even smashed pottery curses just to sleep through the night. Picture this. The day's heat is finally gone. The Nile smells of damp reeds, and a soft wind drifts through Thebes. The sun has slipped behind the horizon, and with it, the sense of safety. For us, night means Netflix and maybe a midnight snack. For them, it meant closing ranks against a world of dangers. Every creak outside wasn't just the wind. It was a sign that something or someone might be trying to get in. And trust me, Egyptians weren't naive. They knew how fragile safety was. Their lives depended on harvests that could be stolen, stored grain that could be raided, and children who could be bitten by a snake in the dark. Night didn't feel like rest. Night felt like a test. So how did they prepare? Let's start with the house itself. Most people lived in modest mud brick homes, cool in the day, fortress-like at night. The walls were thick, not just because mud brick was cheap, but because they worked. They muffled noises from the street, kept out wandering animals, and made it a lot harder for intruders to punch their way through. Entryways were deliberately small. If you've ever stayed in an old farmhouse with one of those tiny door frames you practically have to duck through, you know the feeling. It's awkward for you, but very effective for keeping unwanted visitors from storming in. And Egyptians didn't stop at just bricks and doors. They were clever with layout too. Wealthier families often built their houses around a central courtyard, with storage tucked away and sleeping quarters upstairs. Why upstairs? Because it forced anyone trying to sneak in to climb up and over. A lot harder to pull off without being heard. Think of it like ancient second-floor security. The higher you slept, the more walls, steps, and watchful eyes stood between you and whatever trouble might come crawling out of the night. But even with all that, the limits of physical defenses were obvious. A barred door might stop a thief, sure, but what about the silent dangers? A scorpion slipping through a crack in the wall, a snake curling across the floor while you slept. Or worse, the restless spirits they believed roamed the streets after sunset, looking for cracks in your household's defenses. That's where practical barriers ended, and magic stepped in to take over. For Egyptians, magic wasn't Harry Potter fun, it was survival. Their word for it, Heka, literally meant the force that kept the universe running. Every prayer, amulet, or ritual wasn't superstition, it was maintenance. Like charging your phone at night, you recharged your spiritual defenses. So families armed themselves with charms. You've got Bez, the squat little god who looked like he belonged on a warning sign. His bulging eyes and sticking out tongue weren't cute. They were meant to terrify anything lurking in the shadows. People carved him on bed frames, painted him on walls, even wore his image on jewelry. Imagine tucking your kids in at night, pointing to Bez painted above the bed, and saying, "See? Nothing scary can touch you while he's here." Then came Taweret, the hippopotamus goddess. She's the one that probably made kids sleep easier, even if her design looks downright terrifying today. A hippo standing upright with lion paws and crocodile skin. That's nightmare fuel by modern standards, but to Egyptian parents it was comfort incarnate. She was the ultimate mama bear goddess, looming large over the household, shielding pregnant women and watching over children as they slept. Having her carved on a bedpost or painted on a wall wasn't just decoration, it was a nightly reminder that the fiercest creatures of the Nile were now your allies. To the Egyptians, every part of Tawaret's strange body had meaning. The hippo symbolized raw strength, the lion paws stood for ferocity against intruders, and the crocodile skin warned that nothing lurking in the river or on land could slip past her. In a sense, she wasn't just a guardian goddess, she was the perfect mashup of nature's most dangerous animals, turned into one giant supernatural babysitter. Families believed her presence could chase away nightmares, ward off disease, and keep evil spirits far from the nursery. And then you had Mafdet, the original pest control system. If you've ever jumped out of bed at the sight of a spider, imagine trying to sleep in a world where cobras and scorpions weren't rare visitors. They were part of the neighborhood. Mafdet's image, sleek, feline, sometimes mongoose-like, stood for lightning-fast, venom-killing power. Families believed that just her presence in the home kept the venomous ones at bay. In a way, she was both exterminator and guard cat, patrolling thresholds in spirit form while everyone else tried to get some rest. But Egyptians didn't just lean on gods and hope for the best. They had rituals for everything, and nighttime was no exception. One common practice was sprinkling mixtures at the doorway, beer and garlic being favorites. Beer wasn't just for drinking, it was believed to confuse, trap, or repel hostile forces wandering in the dark. Garlic, with its sharp smell, symbolized cleansing and protection. Mix the two, scatter it by the door, and you had an invisible barrier, kind of like sprinkling salt at your doorstep in a vampire movie. Only this was ancient Thebes instead of Hollywood. It was equal parts practical, symbolic, and reassuring. And then there's my personal favorite, the execration ritual. Egyptians would take little clay figures or pots, scratch the names of their enemies, or sometimes just evil in general, onto them, and then smash them to bits. The logic was beautifully simple: break the object, break the threat. It wasn't just for personal grudges either. Sometimes whole communities would write down the names of foreign kings or rival tribes, turning the act into a kind of communal curse removal. After shattering the pieces, they might bury the shards under the doorway, tuck them in walls, or scatter them around the courtyard. It's basically the ancient Egyptian version of block and delete, except way more dramatic, and honestly, a lot more satisfying. Even everyday household items weren't what they seemed at night. Take the awkward-looking wooden headrest they used instead of pillows. To us, it looks like something you'd find in a chiropractor's Lost and Found, but for them it wasn't just furniture. It was protection. By propping up the head, it literally kept your skull elevated so spirits couldn't sit on you while you slept. And some weren't just plain wood, they were carved with protective inscriptions or images of gods, turning bedtime into a ritual in itself. Imagine laying your head down and knowing the very object beneath you was part pillow, part spiritual bodyguard. Sleeping without one? That would have felt like leaving your bedroom door wide open to the underworld. Now, let's zoom in on a family for a full picture. The Adjo family in Thebes. As twilight deepens, the mother sets out a clay lamp in the main room. Its flame flickers, but the light feels steady, holding back the dark. The father steps outside briefly, scattering a little beer garlic mix across the threshold, murmuring a spell his grandfather taught him. Their eldest son leans a Bez figurine against the inside of the doorframe. His job is to make sure the house demon is awake. The daughters wear amulets to bed, scarabs dangling against their chests. Even the family's scruffy dog takes his post near the doorway, eyes glowing in the lamp's faint light. Inside, everyone relaxes, comforted not just by bricks and wood, but by layers of magic and ritual. This wasn't paranoia, it was balance. Egyptians saw the world in terms of Ma'at, order, and Isfet, chaos. Daytime, with its sun and work and bustle, leaned toward Ma'at. Night was Isfet's domain, so the goal wasn't just to stay safe physically, it was to keep your house aligned with cosmic order. Every ritual, every charm was a little tug toward Ma'at, a way of saying, "Not today, chaos." Sometimes they even called in professional backup, priests or magicians who specialized in writing protective spells. These spells were inscribed on papyrus, amulets, or walls. Families who could afford it might keep a collection of texts tucked away, ready to read aloud during bad nights. Imagine a father whispering lines of a spell over his children as they drift to sleep. It's bedtime stories and home security rolled into one. And let's not forget the role of dreams. Egyptians believed dreams could be messages or warnings. If you had a nightmare, you didn't just shrug it off, you treated it as intel. Families might respond with extra rituals the next night, lighting more lamps, renewing protective spells, or placing fresh amulets under pillows. It's wild to think about, but all of this, dogs, lamps, amulets, smashed pottery, garlic beer, wasn't overkill. It was normal. Protection was layered, both physical and spiritual, because safety was never guaranteed. And in a world where a single snakebite could mean death, you didn't gamble with normal. Now compare this to us today. We've got smart locks, alarm systems, cameras, motion sensor lights. And yet, how many of us still sleep with a nightlight or keep a lucky charm nearby? How many of us double-check the door before bed? Not because we think burglars are lined up outside, but because it gives us peace of mind. Egyptians weren't so different. Their methods seem bizarre to us, but the psychology is exactly the same. We all want to feel safe in the dark. So would you rather trust Alexa to keep you safe at night, or a hippo goddess with lion claws and crocodile armor? Personally, I'm starting to think Taweret deserves a comeback. At the end of the day, these rituals were less about guaranteeing safety and more about guaranteeing comfort. A locked door might fail, a charm might not stop a snake, but together they built a cocoon of belief and practice that made families feel protected enough to rest. And really, isn't that what bedtime is about? Finding enough peace to close your eyes. So next time you tuck in, think about the Adjo family layering their protections like cosmic insurance policies. Mud brick walls, barred doors, oil lamps, barking dogs, garlic beer on the floor, amulets clutched in tiny fists, and a dwarf god statue glaring down the hallway. Maybe it sounds dramatic, but in their world, that's what it took to make morning possible. If you enjoyed wandering through the Egyptian night with me, hit that like button, share your weirdest bedtime ritual in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from the past. Because history isn't just about kings and battles, it's about how ordinary people made it through the night.